There we go. So, by way of introduction, Piyush, forgive me if I've pronounced you incorrectly. Piyush Khaitan, or PK, has been a philatelist for over 20 years, elected as Fellow of the Philatelic Congress of India in 2021, and he's also a Fellow of the Royal in 2022. His main philatelic interests are Indian airmails, civilian wartime mail, underpaid airmail, which gets a tick in my box, and auxiliary markings on airmails as well. And he's participated in many competitive stamp exhibitions, given talks and displayed parts of his collection in various parts of the world. He's also set up a foundation to promote philatelic awareness and research, which is excellent. His exhibit on Indian crash mails won the Champion of Champions Award in the Indian National Stamp Show Amrit in 2023. All very impressive stuff. So now I'll set the security right, Piyush. So can I invite you to share your screen with us?
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Bob, and hello, everybody. I've been looking forward to this talk. So I'm going to just get this screen share done and get on with the show. Are you getting the full screen now?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, terrific. So let me turn my camera off. Oh. Okay. So the talk is about the Air India International 1948 issue, and a whole lot of fun stuff that went around that issue, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So what it was intended to achieve, and different things which are of, a lot of collector interest and philatelic interest around it. So we'll cover that. Just a few things before I start. So one is I would be referring to places as they were referred to at the time these events happened. So for example, Mumbai, it was at that time Bombay, so I'll call it Bombay, or Kolkata was Calcutta, so we'll call it Calcutta. We'll refer to it contemporaneously. And get going. Okay, so a little bit of historical context here around the Indian airmails in general. So really the great impetus came, India was a British colony, and Britain had this great need to connect the empire by air. So, Canada in the west, and going all the way to India and Australia in the east, South Africa in the south. Development of airmails was vital importance, and also I think a little prestigious for them, because the French and Dutch again were doing that very aggressively to connect their countries with the colonies. So in order for that to happen, I think the big breakthrough came in 1929 when Imperial Airways launched the London to Karachi air service, and you were able to send airmail from India all the way to England. Now, the government of India at that time had taken a decision that they would not allow any foreign carrier to carry mail into domestically within India, which meant that Imperial Airways had to drop the mail at Karachi, which was the first major airport at which they landed, and then domestic airlines would carry the mail after that. So that helped the growth of domestic airlines within India a lot. So the important route for them was the eastward extension, which is, taking the mail closer and closer to Australia eventually, and Calcutta, which was at that time the most important country as far as the British were concerned in India. So they first had an airline called Indian State Air Service, which took mail from Karachi to Delhi. That collapsed. The Delhi Flying Club took over the Karachi to Delhi route. And later we had in 1933 Indian Transcontinental Airways, which extended the route all the way from Delhi to Calcutta and a few months later to Rangoon and then onward to Singapore when it was handed over to ANA for taking it to Australia. Tata was a business house headquartered in Bombay with interests in steel. They owned the Taj Mahal Hotel, which was a luxury hotel in Bombay. They had other interests in commodities, textiles. So they were a large industrial group. And one of the members of that family had a great passion for flying. His name was J.R.D. Tata. So J.R.D. Uh, managed to persuade Tatas to invest in setting up an airline. So they got a contract from the government of India to carry the mail from Karachi southward to Madras. And this was the birth of the aviation division of Tata Sons. So it was going from Karachi via Ahmedabad, Bombay, Bellary, all the way to Madras. Later, it was extended to Colombo as well. They also grew into other routes. So they had a route from Bombay was their hub. So they flew from Bombay to Delhi, from Bombay to Travancore, and Bombay to Calcutta. So pretty much they had a pan-India service. They incorporated as Tata Airlines a few years later, and in 1946 they changed the name of Tata Airlines Limited to Air India Limited. So this Air India Limited was the domestic carrier, which was a Tata company. Just after independence, India got independence in August 1947. Just after that, Mr. Tata wrote to Prime Minister Nehru that, we should think in terms of having an international airline for the nation and wanted the support of the government of India to do that. So Air India International, which is a new company, was formed where Tata had a 25% stake, the government of India had 49%, and other shareholders had the rest. So this was incorporated in March 1948 to fly internationally. By a sheer stroke of luck, Lockheed had three aircraft which they had built, these Constellation 749A, for another airline which did not take delivery. So Air India International was fortunate to get these aircraft almost immediately, and they planned to start their commercial operations on 8th of June 1948. So the three pictures I have here, on the left you see there's a DC-3 aircraft with the flag of independent India hung on top of it. You have Prime Minister Nehru standing there in the center. On his left is his sister, Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, who was the Indian ambassador to Moscow at that time. And on his right is his daughter Indira Gandhi, who later went on to become Prime Minister of India. So this plane is a Air India Limited aircraft, which was chartered by the government to fly Vijay Lakshmi Pandit on 14th August 1947 to Moscow as the Indian ambassador to Russia. And that was the first time the Indian flag flew over foreign skies. In the center, you have a picture here of the route survey flight to London. So this is somewhere outside Cairo, and you have J.R.D. Tata standing in the middle. Captain Gazder is the big gentleman on his right. And then you have Neville Vincent in the suit on his left. On the bottom right is the Lockheed, the Malabar Princess, and we'll talk a lot more about that in the next few slides. So it's important to also understand what was going on in the country around this time. So, the World War II was over. India as a nation was very impoverished because of forced contributions to the war. Also, at the time of independence, the nation was partitioned into Pakistan and India. So there was a lot of communal violence at that time. And it was the greatest mass migration in history, where a lot of the Muslim population from India was headed to Pakistan, Hindu population living in what was at that time what became Pakistan, coming into India. And it was a terrible, terrible time, a lot of despair and a lot of desperation in the country. So around all of that, suddenly you hear about this airline, Air India International, being formed, an Indian aeroplane flying across the skies, to Britain. That was a source of great joy, national celebration, pride, and it gave in a hope that here the country is going to leap into a very modern era, and it was really celebrated in many ways. So the flight was the uh, Malabar Princess was the name of the aircraft, VTCQP. 8 June 1948 was the flight from Bombay, Cairo, Geneva, and London. So there were two stops between Bombay and London. So on the bottom left, you see the aircraft, the Malabar Princess, and on the right is one of the very early timetables of Air India International. So you have the Maharaja, who became a very popular icon of the airline later, on his flying carpet, as it were, flying from India to London. And a little bit of background from a more philatelic perspective. So at that time, until 1957, we followed the fractional system of currency. So the rupee was divided into 16 annas, and each anna was divided into 12 pies. So that's how the currency worked. And one anna was roughly equivalent to one pence, one penny at that time. And therefore, 12 annas was like a shilling. Um, The ordinary letter rate to UPU countries was 3 anna 6 pi. That's about 3.5 anna for the first weight stage. This will be relevant when we look at some of the postage due markings, etc., because this was taken and considered as an equivalent to 25 centimes for calculating postage due. Now, coming to the issue of the stamp itself. So, there were various postal notices and Director General circulars issued on the 12th and 25th of May 1948. So, which actually described this particular stamp issue. So, some of the important provisions in these documents, and by the way, everything that you see here, including these notices, are on my website available to view and download. I'll be providing the link at the end of the talk. So one of the things was that this particular stamp would be sold only between 29th May and 8th of June. That was it. All sales would be withdrawn after that. And this stamp was valid only to be used on mail carried on this flight on 8th of June. It was not valid for any other purpose. What it also did was instructed the post office all over India that you can receive mail intended for this flight, uh, but do not cancel it. As it is, without date stamping the mail, pack it up and send it to Bombay GPO, where Bombay GPO will apply the commemorative cachet, the first flight cachet on this mail, and send it onward. Um, you could address it to an address in Cairo or Geneva or London, and these addresses were provided. So London was the Tata office in London, the Air India office. Cairo and Geneva were care of TWA, who was the handling agent for the airline at that time. Also, what the postal department did was they produced a small souvenir cover, and they said that whoever is buying the stamp is, if he wants, he can collect this souvenir cover free of cost, apply the stamp of it, and use that souvenir cover for the flight. And also, if you put your address at the back and address it to any of these three addresses, the letter will be brought back to you as a courtesy. So these were the important guidelines around which the stamp was issued. So this is what the stamp looks like. It's a 12 Anna stamp, Air India International, first flight, 8 June 1948. About 570,000 stamps were printed. It's estimated that about 65,000 postal articles were carried on that flight. A lot of stamps were sold to collectors just to keep them as they are, as mint stamps in their collection, and the rest were withdrawn. We do not have the exact number of stamps sold or withdrawn, so that's still information that we're searching for. Also, what they did was they gave wide publicity to this event in the newspapers well in advance. So you see, for example, on the right-hand side, newspaper clipping about the issue of this stamp dated May 22nd, really informing the readers that this stamp is coming up for sale shortly. You can buy it and how you can use it and get a beautiful souvenir cover for yourself. So there was general excitement both in the philatelic community and non-philatelic community about this particular event. So now the fun begins. The postage rate for Britain was 12 annas, and which is why this stamp was, denominated as 12 anna. So you see here Air India souvenir cover addressed to England with the 12 anna franking and the commemorative cachet. So this is what it was intended to do. Now, you could also send mail on the same flight to Egypt, but the postal rate to Egypt was only 10 anna. They did not produce a stamp with a 10 anna value. So you had to use the 12 anna stamp, overstamp it by 2 anna, and take it and put it in the post. Now, you see the cover at the bottom is the souvenir cover that was printed by the postal department and given free of cost to people who wanted it when they were buying the stamp. So all mail to Egypt with the souvenir cover typically carried 2 annas excess postage. Now, the other halt was Geneva. Switzerland, the postal rate was 14 annas. There was nothing in the postal notice that if you're sending mail to Switzerland, you need to add another 2 anna franking to it. So some people knew about it, and you see on the top left this cover with a totally 14 anna franking, correctly franked with the first flight cachet and flown to Switzerland. But some people only send this cover with the 12 anna stamp. So you see on the top right a cover addressed to Bern with a 50 rappen postage due. And at the bottom, there's a marking which says T29C. Okay, and I'll come to the calculation. And then it is overwritten as 50. So basically, the postage rate was 14 anna. It was franked 12 anna. So understamped by 2. 2 anna, double the deficiency was 4 anna. The ratio, if you remember, 3.5 anna was 25 centimes. So 4 annas was 29 centimes. So it was marked T29C. The Swiss rate at that time was 40 rappen for the UPU letter rate. So if you convert that, 29 centimes comes to 46.5, which they rounded off to 50 and put the postage due stamp for 50. So this is an example of a mail carried to Bern, and it was taxed. For Geneva, there was so much mail that was addressed, wrongly franked, that I think the postal authorities there decided to forgive the deficiency. So mail to Geneva, you will typically find covers with the 12 anna stamp without any postage due marking accepted by them. So we have a cover here addressed to Air India, care of Transworld Airlines Geneva, received by them and marked as return to center. It went back to Calcutta, but they forwarded it to an address in New Zealand, in Christchurch, which forwarded to one more address in Christchurch, New Zealand. So this is an example of a 2 anna understamped cover that was forgiven by the postal authorities. Now, the confusion doesn't end there. In fact, the fun just begins. Because the other thing that the postal department had said was that this stamp is only to be used on the 8th June flight to London. And the post offices all over the country receiving this mail should just collect it without cancelling it, send it to Bombay. But on 29th May, when the stamp started getting sold, so we have an example here of Kanpur, which is in the northern part of the country, where he has put 2 of these stamps at 24 annas franking, and he says, I want to send it registered to this address in Ontario. Now the post office there did not know what to do, because if it's a registered letter, how can I accept it and register it without a date? So they used their discretion. They cancelled it. So this is a cancellation of 29th May on the stamps, which incidentally makes it a first day cover. and it has an arrival mark at the back of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada of 3rd of June. So this is an example of the stamp going by air to a destination, not on the intended flight, used early. Another example is here at the bottom. Here you have this cover addressed to Zifa in Egypt, again cancelled 3rd of June 1948 and registered. So this time he's franked it correctly for Egypt. It's a 12 Anna value here. He's added another 2 Annas franking, made it 14 Anna. 4 Anna was registration, 10 Anna was the airmail rate to Cairo. Franked correctly, but again should not have been cancelled and should not have been sent separately, but it went. And we have an arrival mark at the back of the cover, which reads 7th of June, 48. Even covers that traveled on the flight received all kinds of postal treatment. So you see here a cover addressed from Bombay to London, and you see two of these King George VI 8 Anna stamps. So it's already franked 16 Anna, which is the correct rate, 12 Anna airmail, 4 Anna registration, 16 Anna franking. And then for some reason, another 12 Anna Air India stamp has been stuck on it. It receives the first flight cachet and travels on the flight. Now, the 12 Anna stamp is cancelled at Balakpia, Bombay, which is again contrary to the postal instructions. And this is all within 1 mile of the General Post Office in Bombay. At the bottom, we have a cover where somebody's cut a piece and affixed it on the cover. So this was probably a stamp stuck on another piece of cover or paper that he's taken out and stuck it, and it's cancelled and gone on the flight. This again should not have been permitted. Now we come to examples of mail that missed the flight. So it was too late. So there's a cover from Mussoorie of 4th of June. This is cancelled Charlieville Hotel, Mussoorie, and it went to England, but it was too late for the 8 June flight. So this was invalid. The stamp was invalid. It should not have gone, but it got treated. Another one is Tung, which is a small post office in the northeast of India. Again, the stamp got cancelled on 7 June and went postally. And we have a cover below that, Batanagar, which is just on the outskirts of Calcutta, where they sent it to Czechoslovakia, franked 24 Anna on 8th of June, and it got traveled. So none of these should have been accepted by the post office. The stamps should have been invalidated and either returned to sender or taxed and sent, but they got through. It's just that it was such a big country, all the post offices did not care to read the instructions or just felt that 12 Anna is a lot of money, let it go. So here again, we have examples of more covers like that. This one is from Park Street, Calcutta, 8th of June. It went to England. And another one, 14th June. So this is about 6 days after the flight. It went to an address in the American zone in Germany. Now we come to some examples of correct treatment. So here is a cover with the 12 Anna stamp posted on 5th of June at Calcutta, addressed to Australia. Now, I think Australia is not exactly on the air route from India to England. So the clerk at the post office invalidated it by boxing it off in a blue crayon, and he wrote PTO up there. And at the back, he gave a very nice explanation. The postage stamp is ignored as it is meant for the Air India international flight only. Very clear. And marked it T 50 cents, 25 cent being the letter rate, double the deficiency, 50 cents, which there is no evidence, but the intention was for the recipient in Australia to pay the dues. So this is something they did correctly. Bottom left, you have another example of a cover sent on 7th June to England, too late to make the 8th June flight from Bombay. So somebody's actually taken a pen and put a cross across the stamp. And there's something written on top of it, which I cannot exactly read. And then made him fix another 12 Anna stamp and cancel that. but did not give a cancellation to the Air India stamp, just invalidated it. Another example of Calcutta 12 June is left the Air India stamp alone, did not touch it, but insisted on another 12 Anna stamp being affixed, which is the correct thing to do, and sent it. Here we have another example to England. Now this is interesting. 12 Anna stamp affixed, addressed to England. The red ink box invalidation by boxing it off, and a T50C mark on the cover was applied in India. And it was sent to England to be taxed because it was posted in Calcutta on 9th of June, too late for the flight. Now, what we have is the stamp cancelled by a London cancellation mark and the T50C obliterated. So I would suppose this was obliterated by the post office in London, which was, I think, more forgiving and allowed the letter to be delivered without any evidence of taxing it. The cover below is posted in Ahmedabad to the United States. Again, late use of the stamp. It's dated 26 June, so the stamp should have been invalid, but they cancelled it. They marked it T, and then somebody has struck off the T, and there's some initial there, RS, I couldn't figure out. But it seems to me that the cover just went through without taxing. Here again, you have a cover which was for England. The stamp has been crossed off, boxed off with a red mark, a T stamp put, and a cachet insufficiently stamped for transmission by air. So the conclusion being that it would have gone by surface and taxed at twice the surface letter rate. Again, the same thing here for a cover to the United States from Calcutta, invalidated and marked as T. So I must just add here that you are seeing a lot of examples of this kind of stuff in this display of mine, but it is not easy to come across this material. I've just been very, very, very fortunate, and it's taken me almost 15, 17 years to be able to put this together. But there's not too much of this material available. Now we come to another question. What happens if you address the cover to a domestic destination? What are they supposed to do? So again, here, technically, it should not have been allowed. It should have been invalidated. But I think the post office was quite kind to the people. They sent it to Bombay. In Bombay, they affixed the cachet. Obviously, didn't fly the cover to London, but affixed the first flight cachet and sent it back to the recipient within India. So the cover on top is to Jhansi in the United Provinces, and the one below is to Muzaffarnagar, which is also in the United Provinces. This is a rather grubby looking cover, but very, very ingenious. So there's a great story to this one. So the sender, Mr. G.S. Nelson from Bangalore, from Victory Stamp Shop in Bangalore, has put this 12 Anna stamp on the cover, addressed it to himself in Bangalore. It's covered by this label which is on top of the front of the cover, but it's originally addressed to Bangalore, which you can actually see if you pass a bright torchlight from the back. And this cover is delivered to that address, marked as underpaid, 5th of June 1948, and there's this horseshoe postage due mark here, Bangalore due, to collect the postage due. So he got the cover back, paid the postage due, and said, what can I do with it? So all he did was put a label on top, addressed it to London, was still in time to make it for the 8th of June flight. And despite the invalidation being done by the Bangalore Post Office, it actually received the first flight cachet in Bombay and went to London on the flight. Then, of course, we have examples of later usage. Yatung, Tibet. So the mail from Yatung from Tibet was passed through Siliguri, was the Office of Exchange. We have a registered letter from here to the USA, which is a surface mail letter. It's not an airmail letter, but nevertheless, the stamp was accepted as valid postage in 49. We have another one, a registered letter of 1950 with the Air India stamp. The 51 letter is interesting because it's sent by Professor S.N. Bose, who collaborated with Einstein to, they invented the Bose-Einstein condensate, for which he was supposed to win a Nobel Prize. And it's addressed to Professor Niels Bohr in Copenhagen, who actually won the Nobel Prize for his work on atomic theory. So this again, and it's used, this stamp is used in 1951, December, considered as valid. And we have some more examples of later usage. 1953 cancelled at the Philatelic Bureau. I thought they would know what they're doing, but they have cancelled the stamp there. And again, another philatelic use of 1954. Finally, in 1960, we see the post office doing something right. So we have this cover posted on 28th of June 1960 with a 12 anna and a 4.5 anna stamp. Now, what had happened was on 1st April 1957, India had switched over to the decimal currency system. So the Anna Pi system was out and our rupee was 100 Naya Paisa. And all stamps of the fractional system were demonetized in 1959. So both stamps on the cover were invalid, marked as invalid, and just marked Bombay Foreign. And you have the DLO stamps on the back of the cover. They were not sent on from there. And even the airmail label on the cover is cancelled at Bombay. So with this, I'll come to an end of this talk. Thank you for your patience. I hope you've enjoyed it. Just to let you know, I have two websites that might be of interest to you. IndianAirmails.com is where there is a section on Air India, within which there is a section with all the material that I have showed today, available for you to see. AirIndiaCollector.com is another website I maintain on Air India memorabilia. That's not a philatelic website. So feel free to visit these if you like. And I will now end my show and happy to take any questions.
PK, thank you. Absolutely fascinating.